Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of TNT. It's actually going to be called now, like it has been for the past 4 weeks in a row, Judaism and Christianity, A Contrast, the title of Rabbi Federow's awesome, amazing, most excellent book. And with that said, the most awesome, amazing, and excellent rabbi joining us right here for this hour. And it comes in Spanish, as Rabbi just pointed out very well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. You are the man of the hour, no doubt. So here we go. So the nature of humanity. Now, before we start, I want to ask a question. And in fact, you may already be planning to address this, but I'd like to present it in such a way to turn my microphone up a little bit, and probably yours too. It's funny, before I clicked record, all the levels were perfect, and as soon as I started recording, they dropped. I don't know why that was. Check 1, 2, testing 1, 2, check.
Hello.
Do it again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I love you.
That'll work. Okay, so the nature of humanity. Why is it important to understand the nature of humanity in regards to the Judaism and Christianity contrast?
I think there are a number of reasons, frankly.
Okay, let's start out. I'm going to pass it on to you, but if you won't mind, just
No, don't pass it on. This is a conversation.
Okay.
William, here's how I look at it. Okay. How we view humanity sets up our expectations of humanity. It's important because if I say human beings are sinners, if I emphasize the negative instead of the positive, if I begin with the idea that we are sinners and we can't do anything about our sin, it's already defeatist, and it's already self-defeating. If I say there's nothing you can do to improve yourself, your future, your afterlife,
everything's predetermined, yeah.
Everything's predetermined against you, not just predetermined, but predetermined against you, then why bother trying to be good?
Right.
Why bother trying to improve the world? Why bother trying to help your neighbor? I mean, you personally are going to go to hell no matter what anyway, so what's the point?
Yeah.
And how we view humanity determines our expectations of humanity. You know, I was just having a conversation with someone this week, and if I tell you from the beginning of your life as a child, you're negative, you're bad, you're a sinner, you're going to sin, God rejects you outright, there's nothing you can do about it, aren't you more likely to wind up in jail?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a person who's told from the moment they're born, your future is in your own hands.
Right.
You make yourself what you're going to be. And if you make a mistake on purpose or by accident, then you don't condemn yourselves and beat yourself up. You stop doing the bad, start doing the good, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's hope with that.
Okay.
And I think it's important. I think how we view humanity is important. Everything I read in psychology, popular psychology, but psychology nevertheless, says your self-view, your self-esteem has an awful lot to do with your success or failure in the future. And Judaism, from the moment you're born, teaches you you're not born evil, but you're also not born good. And you have to do something. Not doing bad doesn't make you good. Not doing bad only means you're not doing bad. It just means you're not bad. It doesn't mean you're good. Doing good, you have to pursue what is good, and that gets you, pardon my expression, gets you to move off your tush to start doing something positive in the world. Why? I think that's one of the reasons why, depends on how you count and who you count, but upwards of 16% of every Nobel Prize given in the world has been given to Jews. Anywhere in the world has been given to Jews. I think that's why it's a Salk and Sabin who stopped polio. I think it's why it's a Jewish inventors, because we want to improve the world. And I think part of that reason is because you're expected to, because you can.
Right.
And I just think it, I think it determines so much in our lives. You look at the world positively, or you look at the world negatively.
And in the same way that, like the predestination sort of idea, the same way as somebody who thinks that they're just useless or whatever, that just the way that will affect you when your kids are raised up believing any Christian family raises their kids and their kids and their kids and their kids, like 15,000 generations, with the same fear of Christianity and rejecting Jesus, and then you're not going to become anything unless you first bow to Jesus and give him your life and all this other stuff too. So I could see how in that regard would certainly have a major impact on people as far as that goes. So
William, fear is a great motivator. I'm not saying it isn't. Mm-hmm. But fear also produces bitterness and anger by the people who do what they feel they have to do.
Right.
Okay. A lot of these people who leave Christianity, they won't even look at Judaism, because when they leave Christianity behind them, the only thing they take with them when they leave Christianity is the misinformation, misunderstanding, misrepresentations of Judaism that they learned from the Christianity they're leaving. Mm-hmm. That's what they take.
That's the hardest part, I think, to transition to is trying to unlearn everything,
And to me, it is sad, because they could have a wonderful, meaningful religion, a religion that'll give meaning to their lives, uplift them, and give them a positive view of themselves in the world and their place in the world. But because they learn to reject it from Christianity that they no longer believe in, they still carry that with them, and then they'll go everywhere else to look for a meaningful faith.
Mm-hmm. Right. Wow.
There's a spiritual autobiography by a woman who converted to Judaism. It was in a magazine in 1983. It's called Why I Chose to Become a Jew. Her name was Gail Seville. And she wrote the following, and I think it applies here. Part of what she wrote, it's a brilliant article, but part of what she wrote, I find joy in knowing that as a Jew I am promised justice and mercy from God, not threatened with eternal damnation. Our capacity for decency, morality, and holiness is emphasized. And while the dark and evil side of our character is not denied, we are not condemned for it. God tends to us with a firm and loving hand, not a whip. And from this knowledge comes great joy.
Right.
And I think that is a great way to understand it.
Okay.
I think it's perfect.
I like it. Okay, Rabbi, let's get on to chapter 4.
All right.
The nature of humanity. Here we go, guys.
The nature of humanity. See, Christianity starts out with the idea of original sin. That because Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, all human beings are born not only with a tendency to sin, but also with the guilt of Adam and Eve that they inherit. And by the way, how do they inherit it? Through the act of sex, by coming into existence by their parents. That's another issue. For this guilt, all human beings die. We die because they sinned. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 21 to 22. 1 Corinthians 15, 21 to 22. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. So the idea is that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden sinned, and because they sinned, we die. So Adam and Eve, you ask the random Christian, any denomination, I don't care what denomination, why did Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden? They will answer, because they sinned. The first time the Bible uses the term sin, it has nothing to do with Adam and Eve. It has to do with Cain and Abel. Genesis 4:7. Adam and Eve were removed from the Garden of Eden not because they sinned, but because there was a tree in the garden that God also did not want them to eat from, and that tree was the tree of life. So I would take a look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 22 to 24. Genesis chapter 3, 22 to 24. And the eternal God said, behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil. Who's God talking to? Well, the question becomes, who else besides God knows the difference between good and evil in heaven. The angels. In the chapter before, it says God made all the hosts of heaven. That could be the sun, the moon, and the stars, but it could also be the angels. So God is speaking to the angels and said, the man has become as one of us, knowing good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and also take of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the eternal God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So we didn't get kicked, Adam and Eve didn't get kicked out of the Garden of Eden because they sinned. It explicitly says, lest he put forth his hand and take from the tree of life and eat and become immortal. So the point of Genesis chapter 3, verse 22 to 24 is that Adam and Eve became like God and like the angels because they know the difference between good and evil. But God and the angels have one more thing that Adam and Eve did not yet have, and that is immortality. So God is saying, so he can't get from the tree of life and become immortal, they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But wait a minute. If Adam and Eve have to eat from the tree of life to become immortal, they're already mortal. And some people will say, oh, no, 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 no. They were already in the process of eating from the tree of life. This meant that they stayed immortal, but as soon as they could no longer eat from it, then they became mortal. That's not what the text says. If they only have to eat once from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and immediately from that first bite, they and their descendants forever know the difference between good and evil, then all they have to do is eat once from the tree of life to become immortal. And it says, lest he put forth his hand, take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. It doesn't say, unless he continue putting forth his hand and to continue taking from the tree of life, and continue to eat and living forever. It says, lest he put forth his hand, take from the tree of life, and eat and live forever. So the first time that Adam and Eve would have taken the fruit of the tree of life, they would have become immortal. That means they're made mortal to begin with, which means Adam and Eve did not bring death into the world. We do not die because they sinned. We die because God made death a part of natural order of creation, and therefore there's no such thing as original sin. Okay? I die, if I die because Adam and Eve sinned, then what do we do with another part of the Bible, Deuteronomy 24:16? Which I would have every person on planet Earth who's Jewish or B'nai Noach memorize. If according to Christian theology on original sin, we die because they sinned, then what about the first part of Deuteronomy 24:16? The father shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. That means that you can't inherit somebody else's guilt for a sin they committed. And then it goes on to say, every man shall be put to death for his own sin. That means that Jesus can't die for your sin. I don't die because Adam and Eve sinned. It's against what the Bible says. See, human beings always have a choice. You can choose death, you can choose life, but it's your choice. If you don't have free will, then you cannot be held responsible for your choices because you don't have a choice between good and evil. If you're a sinner because you're born that way, then I can't blame you. You're just doing what comes naturally. It's not your fault you sinned. You're a sinner. You sin. So how can I blame you? Don't blame you. I should blame God because God made you a sinner and brought you into the world as a sinner. Simply the way God made you. In this case, if you sin, how can I blame you? I must blame God who brought you into the world as a sinner knowing you would sin. You shouldn't be held responsible for your sins because God made you a sinner. God brought you into the world knowing you're going to sin. But because you have free will, you can now choose between good and evil. And you have to be just as free to choose the evil as you are to choose the good, or else what's the point? Not your fault. And you're now responsible for your own choices and your own behavior. Okay, anybody who's ever had a dog will remember they're saying to the dog, good doggy. But is a dog really capable of making a moral choice that would lead you to call him good? The dog only knows reward and punishment. And I think the same thing applies to Adam and Eve. Before eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve did not know the difference between good. They didn't know what good was. They didn't know what bad was. They didn't know the difference between the two. Because they did not know the difference between good and evil, how would they know that it was evil to disobey God by eating from a tree they were forbidden to eat from? If you don't know what bad is, how do you know disobeying God is bad if you don't know what bad is? From my perspective, they're not sinning. They're not making a moral choice between good and evil by eating that fruit, no differently than a dog is not making a choice between good and evil. All the dog knows is leave a present that stinks on the carpet, get potch on the tushy with rolled up newspaper. Take it outside and do it there, and then come back in, get a treat. The dog is not making a moral choice, okay? All it knows is reward and punishment. Okay? Genesis mentions this other tree, the tree of life, and Adam and Eve had to eat the fruit of the tree of life to become immortal, so they're made mortal to begin with. The full biblical text of Genesis chapter 3, 22 to 24 tells us Adam and Eve were almost like God and the angels, and they were because both God and the angels knew the difference between good and evil, but they're also immortal. So quite clearly what's happening, as it explicitly says, is that to separate them from the tree of life so they don't become completely like God and the angels, God kicks them out of the Garden of Eden. And by the way, notice that God put a cherubim and a flaming sword. Why? To guard the way to the tree of life so they'd never become immortal. And what's a cherubim? From the word cherev, meaning sword. Okay? When you think cherub, don't think cutesy little fat baby angel with wings and a halo. Think a big sword wielding, angel with muscles all over, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Conan the Barbarian or something. That's what a cherub would have looked like. And God puts the cherub and flaming sword to guard the way of the tree of life. That's what the verses Genesis 3, 22 to 24 tells us. Okay. What was the first thing that God says to the animals? Genesis chapter 1, verse 22. What is the first commandment? Be fruitful and multiply. And that was before Adam and Eve were even created, which is Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 4 verses later. God tells them to be fruitful and multiply. Why? So they could replace themselves because they too were made mortal. No one else can die for your sin. No one inherits the guilt for sin committed by somebody else, previous generations, and that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Look, this may shock some people. Everything I say may shock some people. But the truth of the matter is, what is the ultimate goal of parenthood? The ultimate goal of parenthood is to raise our children in such a way so that they will grow up and leave the house and be able to take care of themselves. God, who is the perfect parent, also wants his children, Adam and Eve, to get up, grow up, and get out of the house, to be more on their own. And what shows a child's independence from their parents? Disobedience. By disobeying, a child is forced to take responsibility for his or her own behavior, and become an adult. Adam and Eve are the kids being forced out of the house. After eating from the tree, they know the difference between good and evil. They're growing up. They're becoming responsible for their own choices between good and evil. And having the ability to choose between good and evil, they are now adults responsible and culpable for their choices between good and evil. And I hate to say this, I think part of the story is that Eve becomes a prototype for all of our wives. Eve becomes a hero of the story. Look, she takes the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and she eats it. In that instant that she eats it, the first bite, she now understands what is good. She now understands what is evil. She now understands the difference between good and evil. She now also understands that her husband will not grow up unless he can take responsibility for his actions. And by giving him the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, makes her husband grow up. And I think that's what our wives do for ours. I think that's what our spouses do for us. They help us, men, grow up. Okay? I think that makes Eve a hero of the story, not like other religious traditions, the horror of the story. Everything I'm saying to you, please understand Devar Acher. Please understand that it is not the usual understanding of the whole Adam and Eve story. But to me, I'm taking everything I say directly from the story. I'm not giving it any spin. I'm just showing you what it says. Okay? This is how the Bible treats Adam and Eve. It tells the saga of what it means to grow up. We don't suffer for the sin of Adam and Eve. They did not bring death into the world. We die because that is how God made the world from the moment of creation. And as far as I'm concerned, to look at Genesis any other way is not a biblical viewpoint. That's it.
Hey there, sorry about that. I was actually on a phone call, and I just dropped my headpiece.
No.
Oh, shucks. I'll have to get on my knees and flashlight here in a minute and find it. So, okay, cool. What's really funny is I was sitting here on the phone call, and I'm always watching your face as we go forward. And anytime I have to take a call, I'm really super sensitive to like movements and body language. And I was pretty sure I saw through lip reading you said, "That's it." And I didn't hear it, but is that what you said? That's it?
That's what I said. Because I figured you were doing something else.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you. Yeah, I turned off my camera for you earlier because I didn't want you to be distracted by what I was doing.
Oh, no,
so anyway,
I'm never distracted by that.
Okay, yeah. So
don't worry about me.
We've had a lot of family drama going on lately.
Sorry to hear that.
With my half brother. Anyway, I'll get into that. I'll tell you about that later. So anyway, I take it everything went well. So we're 30. No, actually, only about we're only 22 minutes in. Do you want to? Is the next one?
It's very long.
It's very long. Okay, got it. Okay. Plus, it looks like you have had a really busy day, and you were rushing to get into your seat already.
Sorry.
Anyway, no, that's okay. That's okay. So we'll button this up. We'll leave this chapter 4 next week. If we need to go over, because it's going to be a long one, we certainly can. Hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. So
yeah.
So guys, moving forward for all the chapters that we're doing now, just expect you may have one of them that's 15 minutes, not likely, but then you may have one that's 2 hours long. But rather than doing
one is on Jewish law.
Okay, that's going to be that could be 2 episodes for all we know.
Well, it's got different subdivisions of the chapter. So.
Okay, got it. Okay, so on screen right now, guys, you'll see Rabbi Federow's Hotmail email address, and also HebrewJumpstart@gmail.com. If you have any basic Bible questions, the first one you want to talk to him about. If you've seen his video on the Hebrew Jumpstart that I edited for him, and you have any questions about Hebrew lessons, how to obtain this, anything Hebrew related, then you want to send that email to HebrewJumpstart@gmail.com. It's very important that you don't...
And go take a look at YouTube. Go to YouTube, okay, and do a Google search. I'm sorry, do a search on YouTube is what I'm trying to say. On YouTube, do a search for Hebrew Jump Start, and my video will come up. And in 1 hour, you can learn how to read Hebrew.
Yep, absolutely.
Because every single combination of every consonant and every vowel is drilled into you, and in 1 hour, you'll know how to sound out the words. What's called decode.
In fact, I'll give you guys let's see, where's the front screen? Let me get it queued up right there. Let's pause that. Okay, I'm going to drag this over your screen so they can see. Oh, let me put you full screen again. That way you can identify it really quick and easily. And it is here. So just look for Hebrew Jumpstart, and that's basically what you're looking for right there. Just look for that white big card behind it with Rabbi Stuart Federow, whatjewsbelieve.org in the background. And then all the letters and stuff. So that's the actual video. It's really like an hour and, 8 minutes long. Now this is actually the wrong link. This says 2:42, but it's actually an hour and 2 minutes, I think, is what it is. Oh, it's this top one here. No, it's actually an hour and 29 seconds. So it's actually an hour on the money. So good deal. Okay, cool. So that works then. Okay, Rabbi, thank you again. Sorry to make you rush to get back here.
Oh no, not a problem. We got it. We got it done.
Yep, we sure did. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you guys same time, same place, Hashem willing, next week. Shalom, everybody. Take care. Peace. Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com. TaNaChTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה